All right, thanks very much, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. As was mentioned, I was here last year and I spoke about energy storage, basically large batteries, and how mines, especially in Ontario, are using that to reduce their energy costs. This year, I thought I'd go a little bit deeper into the tariff structures here in Ontario, but also the macro trends that are affecting energy tariffs, not just in Ontario, but around the world, and that movement towards dynamic pricing and how advanced software is actually the key to really getting the value from battery systems. So first, a little bit about peak power. We are primarily a software company, though we do develop sites with our installing large battery systems. We really see ourselves sitting at the intersection of the grid edge and electricity markets. So just to kind of define that, the grid edge to us refers to where people interact with energy, where people use energy. So our buildings, batteries, obviously, solar power, and electric vehicles, wherever we're using energy. And of course, the electricity markets, I'm referring not to the regular rates that we as residential homeowners pay, but the wholesale rates for electricity that are subject to real-time price spikes. So with our software, we're able to forecast spikes in electricity prices, and we use that information to more efficiently operate could be a fleet of electric vehicles or buildings or batteries in what's known as a virtual power plant. So basically, we use our software to efficiently operate distributed energy resources. And that has implications for the mining industry. I start pretty much all my presentations, if you saw me last year, with this slide to kind of ground the conversation, set the context of understanding the problem. Every piece of grid infrastructure is sized for moments of peak demand plus 15%. So that's the hottest days of the summer when everyone is using energy, plus 15% to make sure that they have reliable power. That's wonderful, but it's very expensive. And the analogy would be, imagine if every highway was designed for Thanksgiving rush hour traffic, but left empty most of the time. Grid equipment has an asset utilization rate of about 20%. So again, as miners, imagine if you paid millions of dollars for equipment that you only used a couple of weeks of the year. That's the issue that's facing the energy industry. So of course, our bills are designed to understand this and kind of deal with this issue somewhat. This is a Class A bill. Any of your Ontario mines would be Class A customers. You have a component based off of your kilowatt hours. That's how much you consume. But two components based off of your kilowatts. That's your instantaneous draw, your peak instantaneous draw. Your demand charges are based off of your 15-minute monthly peaks, and your global adjustment charges, which I'll go into more detail, are based off of 5 hours of the year when all of Ontario is at its most constrained. So the amazing thing about this is 8 hours of the year can represent over 75% of your electricity bill. So again, for in the mining industry, we're talking about millions of dollars being based off of just a handful of hours of the year. So the value proposition is tremendous to be able to forecast those hours, adjust your behavior, and take advantage of the savings. So now I'm going to go a little bit deeper, and I'll move fairly quickly, but talking about what is the global adjustment, tariff structures in Ontario, and how they're actually changing over time. So the global adjustment has been around for quite a few years. It is basically a bucket of costs that are paid by all consumers. But the way that consumers in Ontario pay these costs depends on what class you fall in, and there's 3 classes. Residential and Class B pay off of their consumption, kilowatt hours. We're not going to talk about them. Class A consumers, which are the large energy users like mines, pay based off of these 5 hours of the year that I talked about in the last slide. So how do you become a Class A customer? Well, you have to use a lot of energy. It used to be that if you used over 5 megawatts, you were considered a Class A. Then the Liberal government over time lowered and lowered the threshold, so now commercial buildings can also participate. But basically, it's any large energy user can participate in the program. This is some screenshots of our software. On the right, that's all of Ontario's energy use and our software predicting the peak moment on one of the peak days of the year. And on the left, this is an example of us discharging a battery. So during that key moment, we send the signal to the battery to send electricity to the building. In this case, it was a commercial building. That reduces their electricity load. The utility thinks they're using less energy, but really they're using the same amount of energy. Just a portion is coming from the grid, a portion is coming from the battery, and their bills are lower. It's actually a very effective program, and on average, Ontario is able to lower the peak amount. Again, think of the highways. They're able to take cars off the road. They're able to lower the peak amount by about 1.4 gigawatts because of the ICI program. It's a tremendous amount, so it is a successful program. However, the program has problems. And after roughly 11 to 15 years, I'm not sure exactly, of expanding the program, under Liberal rule, the Conservatives have come to power and decided to take a fresh look at it. So they're stakeholdering potential changes to the program. And in many ways, they're right that the program has flaws. It's not a perfect program, and it does need to be changed somewhat. So first off, there's a disconnect in the program. It was designed primarily as an industrial incentive. It's even in the name. The ICI program is the Industrial Conservation Initiative. It actually is a way to kind of subsidize industry without falling afoul of World Trade Organization rules. So it was designed for that, but it also benefits the grid. But that's a bit of a disconnect, and they don't always match up perfectly. And there are some areas where it bumps against what is the intent of this program. Probably the biggest criticism against the program is these global adjustment costs need to be paid. So it actually transfers costs from Class A customers to other customers, and then there's a question of fairness. Is it fair for other people to be paying these costs? The bucket of costs that I talked about within the global adjustment is, I don't want to say random, but it's not directly related to peak demand. If you're considering this program as a grid management program, then it should be a service where you're paying for reductions in load. Therefore, the cost should be associated with the savings generated from reducing that peak demand. But as it currently stands, it isn't designed that way. It's just this big group of costs, and it's just happens to be a benefit that we also get peak reductions from it. And then finally, the ICI program has been around since long before energy storage or batteries have been popular. It wasn't designed for batteries, and it doesn't fully value all of the services that could be provided by energy storage. So the main takeaway here is that there are changes that will be required to the program. The industry gossip, for those of you considering your investment or that have recently made an investment, is that they are not making wholesale changes. When I say they, the Conservative government is not making wholesale changes to the program. The gossip is that they are postponing any major changes till after the next election, most likely, and that they are trying to provide options so that this program will exist along with other options. But there will be changes. We just don't know what those changes look like. So let's go a step further and to say, what would a more appropriate program look like if you're not looking at it from an industrial incentive perspective? That's a political consideration. That's beyond my area of expertise or to talk about. But let's focus on a program that reduces those peaks. Again, thinking of the highway metaphor from a grid perspective. What would a more efficient program look like? Well, in our opinion, what that would look like is some form of dynamic pricing, where the price of electricity is related to the true cost during those peaks. And in many cases, that would have a locational component as well as a time-based component. Put simply, think of supply and demand. If you want to get electricity to your house in the suburbs at night, when demand is low, that should be cheaper than getting electricity to a commercial building in the center of the city during the peak hours of the summer. So we believe that with new technologies, there's ways to actually create kind of a stock market of energy to really understand the true cost of energy to provide the right price signals. So we're doing it. Our company has got government funding to develop what we believe is going to be the world's largest transactive energy pilot right here in Toronto. So this pilot has a number of components to it, but on a high level, we're taking 20 buildings. We're focusing not just on the tariff structure, the energy costs, but also trying to bring in electric vehicles. And I know that electric vehicles are also a hot topic for the mining industry, but we're looking at it in a different way. We're looking at it to say, what if you could use the battery in that electric vehicle and take charge from that battery to reduce your peaks? So we're installing two-way bidirectional charging infrastructure with this vision that the participants in the program will fill their cars at home. We're giving them a home charging system. They're going to drive to the city, and then during those peak moments, we're going to use their battery and pay them for that energy to reduce the peaks during those key moments. So we're installing all of this infrastructure, and we're deploying software that's going to forecast peak events, send the right market signals, those price signals, and optimize the operation of DERs to track all transactions. While this program is focused on an urban setting with commercial buildings and EVs, the concepts are applicable across the province and would be easily transferable to industrial settings as well. As you can imagine, in part due to the kind of scale and ambition of the project, we've attracted a lot of high-level partners. Just a few that I want to point out, the IESO. I mean, there's only one system operator in Ontario. Their vision is that they will manage the bulk generation, the nuclear generators, all the large generators, but they don't have visibility into micro generation, batteries, buildings, electric vehicles. But over time, especially with the proliferation of electric vehicles, these distributed energy resources are going to become ubiquitous and going to have a huge impact on the grid. And the ISO needs visibility into that. So on top of providing the right price signals, we also provide visibility and control elements to the utilities and the system operators. So this is the last slide just to kind of show what that might look like. Like any market, there's a sell side, a buy side, and a platform to manage it. Typically, when you think of energy and utilities, you think of this one-way flow where utilities sell energy to consumers. Well, we're flipping that on the head. We're selling energy services to utilities. Again, go back to the highway metaphor. We're taking cars off the road when congestion occurs. It's quite simple if you think of it from that perspective. So on the sell side, we've got EVs, we've got buildings, or we could easily have industrial participants. On the buy side, we've got the IESO, we've got the local utilities, Hydro One, the system operators that have different energy demands at different times. And the exchange is a platform that basically does this real-time price discovery of what the value of those services are. Okay? So the reason I'm going into all this detail, again, I want to always keep it applicable to your industry and what you're doing. I know that many mines are taking advantage of the ICI program. Most simply, many mines are shutting down on the hottest days of the year. If it goes over 32 degrees, they just shut down with the thought that they're perhaps going to hit these peaks. Maybe they pay for a service that gives them some kind of forecast of when these peaks might occur. Other mines have invested in infrastructure, in batteries, in some cases very large and expensive batteries to take advantage of the program. Part of my messaging here is to understand the difference between the service and the value and the existing tariff and the program. The tariff, the ICI program, is going to change over the course of the next 10 years. There are certain fundamental aspects of the program that it will not be here for the life of that battery if you're buying a battery with a 10, 15-year life. Understand that, but don't be scared of it, because the value of the services are very real. So as you make these investment decisions or choose companies to partner with, just keep that long-term view that the value that's being quoted for global adjustment abatement is not the true value of the services provided and is not going to be the true value of the course of the 10 years. So by no means am I trying to dissuade you from energy storage. The message here is that this is a new technology that actually has a lot of services and value that it provides to the grid, but do it with your eyes open of what you're getting into over the next 10 to 15-year period, which is the life of those batteries. All right, so I don't know if there's time for any questions. I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll try and stick around for a little bit. If you do want to follow up afterwards, I won't be here all day. Please take my email. I'd be happy to answer any questions either here or via email later on. Thank you very much.